This is Gibraltar Today. We're going to talk you through what the Principal Auditor's report says on overtime in the public service, and we'll do that in just a short while. But first, the European Parliament has this week rejected an attempt to have Gibraltar kept on the list of financial high-risk third countries, eliminating the last obstacle to having Gibraltar removed from the list. The Minister for Trade, Justice and Industry, Nigel Feetham, had himself been in Brussels campaigning for this very outcome, and he says that the move ends uncertainty and reflects the Gibraltar's compliance since being delisted by the Financial Action Task Force over a year ago. And Mr. Feetham joins us in the studio now. Good afternoon. You must be very happy with the outcome.
Good afternoon, Jonathan. Yes, I am delighted with the outcome. And let me say that I think, as you know, I've come to this program on at least 4 occasions, and I have, at every stage of the journey, explained to you, and indeed to the people of Gibraltar, what is it that we were doing and why we were doing it. You will remember, Jonathan, that I gave a commitment during the general election to the people of Gibraltar that I would work very, very hard and tirelessly to get Gibraltar off the FATF grey list, the so-called grey list. We did that back in February. We accomplished the policy objective that we set out to do. But of course, the problem thereafter was that although the European Commission is represented in the FATF decision-making body in order to take the decision as to what countries come on and off the list on a technical assessment of their compliance with anti-money laundering, unfortunately, the whole thing was embroiled in the wider politics of the subject matter. And in April last year, the European Parliament took a vote to block Gibraltar. What happened then, Jonathan, if I can take you through some of the timelines, we had the European election during the summer, so we couldn't engage in active lobbying during the summer period. We had a change of the European Commission. In other words, the members of the European Commission, there was a change and a new election of the leadership of the European Union towards the end of last year. So as soon as the European Commission was reconstituted, as soon as the European Parliament MEPs were in place, we've embarked on very direct lobbying efforts in Brussels. I went to Brussels at the beginning of this year. I have had numerous meetings with the European Commission, and indeed I went for another meeting in Brussels 3 or 4 weeks ago in order to lobby MEPs on a one-to-one basis. And let me tell you that I am delighted with the result, Jonathan, because I think if we hadn't done it, there was a risk, I think, that Gibraltar would have stayed on the list. It does demonstrate how effective lobbying can be, particularly when you build a personal relationship with decision makers.
So, just to be clear, are we off the list? No, but we are going to be.
Okay, the process is that as a result of the European Commission's Delegated Act, not having garnered sufficient votes to block the proposed decision by the European Commission, that in 20 days' time, Gibraltar's name will come off the list, and that will then be published in the official journal of the European Union. And technically, you need the consent of the European Council. There is no basis whatsoever to even suggest that there is a risk of the European Council not providing that approval.
And let's imagine that it goes through and Gibraltar is placed on the white list of countries that do things properly. What difference will it make to the way that Gibraltar's businesses go about their day-to-day?
It obviously relieves businesses in Gibraltar and financial institutions from the higher compliance requirement that they would be expected to undertake if you're on the list. So that in itself relieves businesses from that burden. It also allows us to compete for areas of business within the European Union that would be very difficult for us if we remained on the list. And let me say, Jonathan, that there were 4 resolutions in the European Parliament to block, effectively, to keep Gibraltar on the list. 3 of them were not directed at Gibraltar. So 3 of those resolutions were resolutions from those European members of parliament that had objections that others on the list should not come off due to their relationship with Russia. There was only one resolution that mentioned Gibraltar in very inflammatory language, and that was a resolution put forward by the Vox party, the far-right party in the European Parliament. That resolution achieved very few votes, and therefore we defeated the one resolution that we set out to defeat. And let me also say, Jonathan, that of all the MPs that I sat down to explain Gibraltar's position and the steps that we had taken since we should have come off the list back April, because if you remember, I came to this program and I said to you that my approach in my discussions, both with the European Commission that were very supportive and indeed with MEPs, was not to tell them off that we should have come off the list back in April, but to say, notwithstanding and despite the fact that we should have come off, let me tell you the work that we have been doing since. And I was able to demonstrate that we had gone far and beyond the requirements that they were expecting. And I'm very grateful that all the MPs that I engaged with, none of them voted for the Vox resolution.
Good stuff. So the developments then in the European Commission reflect a lobbying effort, but I'm sure you will agree the very significant effort by a large team of professionals working in your industry and in concert with your industry to make sure that we have reached those standards.
Absolutely. No? I would never undermine in any way, shape or form the effort of my team in making sure that we delivered on this policy commitment.
Okay,
but it's things as simple as, Jonathan, it's things as simple or as difficult as that we have resourced the economic crime unit at a level that has never been seen in Gibraltar before. Okay. For example, that's one of the things that we've done. These are policy things. We've introduced unexplained wealth order legislation. That certainly wasn't a commitment of the GSD, it was a commitment of this government post the general election. It wasn't in the manifesto. We felt that we needed to do it. We did it. That strengthened our position. These are also policy commitments by the government of Gibraltar.
What would you say to somebody who's listening to this interview, Mr. Feetham, and has been listening to our coverage of the of the Principal Auditor's report, which contains an accusation that the Chief Minister blocked a compliance audit of the savings bank and is now hearing us talking about Gibraltar being whitelisted and thinking these things seem to be a little bit at odds?
Let me address that. Let me just point out that this auditor's report was tabled in Parliament 3 days ago. So I've only received a copy of the report 3 days ago. It's 539 pages. So I'm reading through the report. Obviously, I have read that part of the report. And let me say this, Jonathan, but this is important. I start by saying that just because somebody says that something's true is true, doesn't make it true. And therefore, I've read the accusation by the Principal Auditor that says that the Chief Minister has acted in an unconstitutional manner and improper in blocking him from carrying out a money laundering and AML or compliance audit. Well, wait a minute. The Chief Minister told him very clearly, and it's in the report, so you've got to read it in the report. You don't take my word for it. I've read it in the report, and I trust the Chief Minister to have said this, because even the Principal Auditor has said that this is the position of the government and indeed the position of the Financial Secretary. And I have looked at the legislation over the last 24 hours, and I have no doubt in my mind that that is the case, that the Principal Auditor in law does not have the statutory powers to audit the Gibraltar Savings Bank from an AML perspective. If that is the legal position, as I believe that to be the legal position, and indeed that is the basis of the legal advice that the government received, and it's in the report itself, and Mr. Sacramento doesn't suggest that he has taken legal advice to contradict the advice that was taken by the government of Gibraltar. Well, if that is the case, then, Jonathan, nobody's blocking him from performing his statutory duties. What it means is that he wanted to discharge a statutory function for which he had no responsibility. I also read from the report, by the way, over the last 24 hours.
If I may, Mr. Feetham, you were talking about the save one particular issue, and we've got one more minute, so I just wanted to ask you before we time out, how you when you picked up the report and read it for the first time, generally, how did you feel?
Well, obviously, I've been involved in governance and compliance for most of my career, 31 years. I've published a book on governance and compliance. I am used to a situation where auditors audit financial institutions and they engage with the company so that they deliver a draft report to the company to allow an engagement with the company, to allow the company to correct any material inaccuracies. That didn't happen. And let me also say this, that according to Mr. Sacramento himself, he wanted to review. He wanted to review the silence back from a compliance perspective in the middle of March,
Mr. Feetham,
2.5 months before he was due to retire.
In respect of final conclusions, not because there was a conversation throughout.
Well, there is a conversation, but what you do ordinarily in an audit process, because I've done it, I have read over 100 audit reports in my entire career. I am used to receiving a draft audit report, if I am a director of leading companies, as I have been, to allow us to go through the report and draw...
Like a Maxwellization process.
Absolutely right. That's a very good analogy. Well, that didn't happen on this occasion. Let me also say this. I'm the last person...
In short, because we're out of time.
I am probably the last person that you should ask about expenditure. I don't like to spend money. Everybody knows that I don't like to spend money. I like to raise money. I believe in raising money. We've done that with the tax ministry. You have seen, Jonathan, that we have delivered corporate record tax receipts this year, and it's down to the work the government has been doing. And that has not even been disputed by the opposition.
No, the opposition is saying that, you know, if hard work has gone into raising money, it's been in some way squandered.
Yes, but let us examine that, okay? Let us examine that.
Very quickly.
I stopped overtime in my core ministry within months of being elected, yeah? Your report last night on the overtime actually drew attention to the fact that the tax office seems to be in a very good place when it comes to overtime. You've said it. That's my ministry. The police has overtime, but the police have been understaffed. We know that they have had manning issues, so therefore necessarily there has to be.
Let's keep you on. If you've got an extra 5 minutes,
let's stay here.
Yeah,
absolutely.
We're going to take a very quick break for the latest local news.
Absolutely,
and we can carry on the conversation.
Please, let's do that.
Thank you, Nigel Feetham, Minister for Trade, Industry and Justice, who's going to stay on, and we'll talk a little bit more after the latest local news, which is next.
Gibraltar Today with Jonathan Scott.
Thank you for joining us. We're live from Broadcasting House speaking to the Minister for Trade and Industry, Nigel Feetham, who has come into Broadcasting House to talk to us about Gibraltar's delisting or imminent delisting by the European Commission. We're in a good place there, but we're talking about the Principal Auditor's report, and Mr. Feetham was talking about overtime levels not being high in tax office, which is one of your departments, and then you moved on to the Royal Gibraltar Police, where there is a significant amount of overtime, but you were saying that this is justified because they have been understaffed?
Yeah, well, yes, the point is, and it's certainly a point which is accepted by the Principal Auditor himself in his report, that given that the police has had manning issues, they are in a situation, they've had manning issues until we've obviously increased the complement, which we've done significantly, especially over the last 6 months. But prior to that, because of manning issues, police officers were required to do overtime. So this is not a case of police officers abusing overtime. This is a case of police officers having to do the overtime in order to be able to meet the policing demands of the public. And the auditor himself, the principal auditor, doesn't criticize them for it. But yet, I was hearing from outside here, this room, Jonathan, that you've singled out the RGP. But the point to make is that certainly the RGP has not undertaken any abusive practice in relation to overtime. The point I would also make, Jonathan, is that the opposition themselves criticized the overtime and the overtime spending of the RGP in Parliament. And I've said exactly what I've said here today. And in relation to the scrutinizing of RGP overtime, the Commissioner of Police justified every single expenditure in relation to this, not only to me, but to the Chief Minister and indeed also to the Financial Secretary. And although this report is not about the RGP, I feel obliged to draw that to the attention of people that are listening.
All right. We want to ask you, if we can, Mr. Feetham, about the fact that you brought in record tax revenue this year. When you read the report, if we put to one side your reservations, there must be stuff in there that you're upset about and which you want to see rectified.
Well, I think there are things in there that obviously require an explanation. And let me tell you that the Chief Minister has committed to giving an explanation on every single item of criticism in the Principal Auditor's report. Let me also point out that the report itself is the report for the year 2018-2019. And the Principal Auditor draws attention to matters that relate to things that were actually quite recent. So there we have a Principal Auditor who's racing against the clock because he was due to retire on the 31st of May to draw attention to matters which are highlighted in a report for which it doesn't relate to the year. And the clearest example of that is the issue of the compliance audit of the Gibraltar Savings Bank. Jonathan, the report itself highlights that in the middle of March, he engaged with the Savings Bank director to ask for an AML compliance audit, and he was told that he didn't have powers to discharge that function. Let me tell you from my experience, my professional experience in this area, that there was no way that the Principal Auditor in 2.5 months could have done a comprehensive audit, even if he had powers. And he certainly, according to the report and according to the position of the Chief Minister, he had no powers to do it. And that was on the basis of legal advice received by the government of Gibraltar.
We have covered that. No, let me just ask you before we let you go, apart from the, as we've seen through the statement made by the Office of the Chief Minister already and statements that you've made here today, apart from questioning the methodology and the motives, the government, as you've said, is going to go through the substantive claims and see where there is room for improvement.
Absolutely
because
right.
It is the people's money after all.
Jonathan, you are absolutely right. As I said before, I don't like to spend money, and Joe Bossano doesn't like to spend money. And even Fabian Picardo is also critical about certain aspects of public expenditure. I have been in the cabinet and we've had discussions around over budget spending. And Fabian, in all fairness to Fabian, he has asked ministers to put requests for supplementary funding. He has done that. And let me also say, and I hope I'm not saying anything that I shouldn't be saying, the Chief Minister, on a number of discussions that we have had in a cabinet, mandated, and as far as I am aware, mandated the Chief Secretary to do a review of overtime expenditure, of excessive expenditure. Only last week, Jonathan, we passed a bill through my ministry to stop abusive tax practices. So this is work in progress. Of course, if there are issues, they need to be dealt with. I wouldn't be somebody that would sit here to say that if there are issues, you ignore it. I would never defend the indefensible. But let us wait for clarification, let us wait for explanations, and then we will have a debate in Parliament. And you can rest assured that the Chief Minister of Gibraltar will face the opposition down like he has done on every single debate, including in the budget debate last week.
All right. Thank you, Minister for Trade and Industry and Justice. Nigel Feetham, you finished my sentence for me. Thank you for joining us and for talking to us about the Principal Auditor's report. Good afternoon to Brian, who says that he'd like to congratulate Mr. Feetham on the delisting aspect that we talked about a short while ago.
I appreciate that.
Good afternoon also to Nick, who says focusing on the tit-for-tat responses, the issue of financial mismanagement of public money should be the focus.
I haven't done that.
Yeah.
I haven't done the tit for tat.
that might be a comment for us. That when the government issues a press release, we need to talk about it. When the GSD issues a press release, we need to talk about it. They are elected members of Parliament. Of course. But Nick does say that given that the conversation with yourself has been about the grey list, it is a very poignant conversation. And we've got some comments coming in also from John and Bev. Thank you for getting in touch. Thank you for getting in touch, Bev and John. John just wants you to answer a very simple question, if you want, Mr. Feetham, which is, do you support transparency at the savings bank?
Well, absolutely. I support every form of transparency, Jonathan. Every form of transparency.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure to talk to you, Nigel Feetham. Thank you. No question of value for money when it comes to Nigel Feetham. You always deliver when it comes to an on-air interview.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. This is Gibraltar Today. We are looking at the Principal Auditor's report across a number of days, as you know, and you may be wondering, what is it and why do we continue to talk about it? Well, GBC has attempted to answer these questions for you. So we're reporting on the report, but we're also now, we've published an explainer on gbc.gi, which talks you through what the Principal Auditor's report is, why we are talking about it, who is Tony Sacramento, what does his report say, what is an ex gratia payment, what has the government said so far about this? What did Fabian Picardo say when he appointed Tony Sacramento versus what is he saying now? What has the opposition said about it all? Will the report be debated in Parliament soon? What was the recent controversy in Parliament about the Principal Auditor's report? A series of questions which I have just posed, but which are there are attempted answers for. If you go to gbc.gi, you can click on what is the Principal Auditor's report and why is everyone talking about it.